I don't have a soft spot for many NFL players because it's pointless, right? You don't want emotion to get in the way of decision making because emotion can lead to poor decisions, which then hurt our chances of winning a fantasy title. That said, I have always had a soft spot for Darius Slayton, the Giants' longtime wide receiver, a fifth round pick 6 years ago. Um, Got through, I think it was 4 years ago. Or 3 years ago, he was maybe fifth or sixth on the depth chart, in the preseason and somehow made it through final cuts and then ended up becoming a serviceable, fantasy streamer. That's kind of what he does. He is someone who, and I don't know how athletes like him do it, where you're basically, on the bench. Maybe you get in for a few plays and then suddenly a starter or two go down and all eyes are on you as a co-starter to help lead a team to victory. He seems to have also, in some ways, gotten better over the years. His catch rate has improved, despite the fact that quarterback play has not. And in fact, in 2023, his quarterbacks had a 101.8 QB rating while targeting him, which was a career high for him. This year in limited action, it's 112. And that limited action is about to turn into a lot of action. Because Malik Nabers, as of this recording, Sunday evening, I obviously don't know if anything broke overnight because that's not when I'm recording it, but Malik Nabers is feared to have suffered a season-ending injury. Awful news for him, obviously. Awful news for the Giants as an organization, which just won their first game and Jackson Dart's NFL debut. I mean, it was an otherwise idyllic debut for a high-priced rookie quarterback, and then they lose Nabers in the process. And obviously fantasy managers who drafted him, a lot of them in the first round, maybe some of you got him in the second, you're shaking your head right now, or you've been shaking your head for hours, or you're tired of shaking your head and now you just want to sleep. It's brutal to, assuming the reports are accurate, it's brutal to lose someone with that kind of ceiling, that kind of ability, for the entire year. And now the question becomes, well, okay, what's left of the team? And I don't like really saying the obvious. It's when somebody gets hurt, you could do a whole podcast about, well, this next guy is going to be great. Well, yeah, okay, Wan'Dale Robinson. Sure. He's been very good, at times not very good, but he's been surprising this year on the whole. He's had some couple big games. And, presumably he'll be good still. I don't think that's the interesting story. The interesting story is Darius Slayton, because there is no one else in the Giants organization right now who can step up. They have, Gunnar, Olszewski, and they've got, perennially underperforming, Jalen Hyatt, who's, I think, a former third round pick maybe, and in his third season, and just hasn't been who they thought he might be. And so once again, as it happens year after year, it falls on Darius Slayton to play this outsized role compared to what he's probably been paid to do and what fantasy managers expect him to do. To put a button on this really is that he has had 68 starts in his career. Granted, those starts, and I'm not counting yesterday. If he did technically start, that's not factoring in because I don't have that data yet, whether he's officially listed as a starter. But 68 official starts, a lot of those he was the number 3 receiver. So you might imagine that it's not fair for me to even judge his statistics based on that, because some of those he got 1 or 2 targets. He was just kind of technically a starter, but not full-fledged. He was like the number 3. He started, but depending on the play calling, he might cycle out. Maybe he gets 30 snaps, something like that. But in those 68 starts, he averaged 8.7 fantasy points per game. Doesn't sound great, but in the 38 games where he had at least 5 targets, and 5 targets to me is expected going forward for someone like Darius Slayton. We should expect 5+ targets. I think it's a realistic expectation for a guy who is the clear-cut number 2 in this receiving core with no clear-cut number three. So in all 38 starts where he had at least 5 targets, he averaged 11.5 fantasy points. Picking him up is a no-brainer to me. I think on my blog today, I might have something to the extent of, he's worth a look in most leagues. I couch it because I don't know. Some of you are in 10-team leagues and you just don't have time for a team's number 2 wide receiver unless he's, an exceptional number 2 receiver, like a Devontae Adams or someone like that who, of course you start him and you don't even think about it. Darius Slayton is clearly different, but no less important to a fantasy team that really needs to find somebody who can step in. I know in my 14-team league, there really aren't any good wide receivers left. I mean, people clamored to try to get Trey Tucker last week, obviously, because of his blow-up game in week 3. He flopped yesterday. Someone invested like 25% of his free agent budget, waiver budget on him. And then you see what happens. And I'm sure Trey Tucker's going to have some good games, and he'll have some flops. I think Darius Slayton, is going to provide more consistent, low ceiling, high floor value in a very concentrated offense where it's a dual threat Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, Wan'Dale Robinson, and Slayton. Maybe you'll see, some Theo Johnson in there. But again, I'm counting on at least 5 targets. And his history shows that he can be good enough to be serviceable. I'll say one more thing, that in the past, he has had some really rocky quarterbacks. I mean, Daniel Jones we now see as a much better quarterback than what we saw mostly with the Giants. But Slayton also played with backup quarterbacks. In Jackson Dart, he's getting someone who might be, on paper, the most talented quarterback he's ever played with. It might take time for Dart to become that kind of passer that is going to put him on that level of the best that Slayton's ever seen. But for now, I think Slayton is also a long-term investment as we get closer and closer to the midpoint and the later points of the season. As Dart gets more comfortable in that offense, we might actually see Slayton play some of his best football. So to recap, I don't want this to sound obvious of next man up because you all know next man up. What I'm trying to impart to you is that Slayton is a special kind of receiver because he's been a next man up pretty much every year of his career. And he's done a really good job at being next man up. You don't have to wonder whether Slayton is going to come into that offense in week 5 as a starter and immediately be capable of stepping up. And that's the kind of fantasy asset I want as a, number 3 receiver if I really don't have a reliable double-digit number 3 receiver. I'm BJ Riddell, Fantasy Football for Winners. Follow me on the blog. Email me anytime. We'll see you tomorrow.